William Byron gets launched up onto the retaining wall.
The chaos round continues. Another big shakeup in points and a non-playoff driver in victory lane. We'll break it all down.
Buescher gets on the inside.
Oh, that is so awesome.
Welcome into a new episode of NASCAR Inside the Race, presented by Consumer Cellular. I'm Travis Peterson, crew chief of the 34, joined with Drew Blickensderfer, crew chief of the 10. We keep talking about the chaos round. We keep talking about road courses and speedways. The road course did exactly what we thought. All the new elements played a huge factor in the way this race played out.
Track configuration change, that was an unknown. The tire was an unknown. Got a little longer practice on Saturday to try to figure that out, but I think it took till halfway through the race, Travis, before people started feeling comfortable with what strategy they needed and how to get to the front.
So Chris Buescher wins the race. We're going to dive into his day. We're going to go all the way back to lap 1 and jump on his onboard because we've talked about wreck avoidance several times in different places. Lap 1, 17, has to do wreck avoidance right away.
Yeah, we talked about it last week, Travis, about how you need to stay out of wrecks at Atlanta. Right here, you start seeing a pile up kind of starting at the end of the inner loop here. Chris Buescher, the seas kind of part for him right here. And there's a couple angles we'll get to look at this. There's playoff guys off into the guardrail. There's all kind of chaos, and this happened right in the middle of the pack.
We have a pretty cool graphic here with the crosshairs highlighting Chris. And just watch all the chaos and how much they stack up in front and come from behind. Ooh, he was close to getting crashed from multiple angles there. I mean, he's got the 8 sitting sideways in front of him. The 43 almost runs him over.
You can see there's 5 or 6 cars in front of him where that wreck starts to happen on the outside of the inner loop. And Chris has to get slowed down. This is a bad angle for spotters as well. You have spotters in the bus stop, but they're almost at ground level. So it's hard for them to be able to see how far a car is behind you or in front of you. They can kind of just basically see right around your car. So it is tough for a spotter right here, and it's really tough for a driver to try to get out of the way. And it just kind of, it parted for Chris right there. And the 43, like you said, he didn't get the checkup as early as everybody else did and almost got wiped out from behind.
So good job making it through there. We know the big move we're going to get to at the end, Chris versus SVG. Let's look at both of their days and see how they end up getting side by side.
Yeah, like we said, Chris starts kind of mid-pack, SVG's towards the front, and you see them start coming together. And what I notice here is Chris has a really good race car. You know, if Chris didn't have a good race car, it would be more plateaued, maybe parallel to SVG. But he's moving through every green flag run. He's moving closer to the front. So his car is good, and Scott Graves' strategy helped him get there.
Yeah, and the other key factor this day for both these guys is skipping the stages. We talked a little bit about this. Road courses, you have the option, you'll get stage points, or you have the option to maintain your track position. There's really no having both. And unfortunately, it's just a factor of you don't lose a lap and stage racing at road courses. We didn't do it for summer last year. We brought it back. Every non-playoff guy who just wanted to get the win, this was their strategy all day. And both times, Buescher jumps up a bunch. You see the huge dip where he goes to the back and other guys stay out, and then you see the big jump after the stage. And I think this is actually really interesting just watching it. Buescher has this second stage where he kind of just maintains. But when you get to the last one here, is really where he makes up the ground. And that becomes because of a unique situation that presented itself in the middle of the race. Let's dive into what happened at the end of stage 2. This is coming to 3 to go.
Yeah.
And I think a key thing to note right here is the pit road closes at 2 to go when the leader hits the stripe. So if you're farther behind than maybe 1 or 2 seconds to be able to hit pit road entry from anybody who's leading, because you don't know what they're going to do, you have to come 3 to go. Mm-hmm. And you want to come 2 to go for all the tire fall off and everything they talk about. But right here, we're running 3rd, and we're the first one to peel off, and we drag a bunch of people in. Everybody's coming 3 to go.
Yeah, and like you said, Travis, we have numbers known to us before the race starts. If you're a certain amount behind the leader, you can pit and not lose a lap, like you said. The stages are fairly short at Watkins Glen. This second stage was only 15, 16 laps. Almost the whole field was within that 35 seconds of the leader. So they were able to come. And as you can see when you roll this, there is a lot of cars coming with 3 to go to try to hit pit road and cycle in front of all these guys you see staying on the racetrack.
Yeah, you see mostly playoff guys like we talked about stayed out right there. That's why I left it paused for a moment. But 20-something cars come to pit road. We're all servicing our car. And when we get to the end of this clip, it's going to show what happens. And here we are, 499 car stuck in the gravel.
And there's the caution. Yes, and that's going to set up why Shane van Gisbergen and Ross Chastain didn't pit, because they were still on the racetrack as one in first and second. Both of them were going to be able to come the next lap if they wanted to, but that caution kind of ruins it for them.
I can tell you right now, I was fist bumping. I came from third. I thought these guys were going to potentially get stuck out there and then pit, and I thought we were going to be right where we needed to be. 99's off.
Yep.
We have the 1 and 16 come around on the track right here, and the caution's going to come out. I believe we have a pause in here. 99's still stuck. NASCAR does throw the caution. You can see that right here. We got the caution lights. It's hard to see, but right here, if we watch this thing play forward, there's a blinking yellow light that says you cannot come to pit road, and these guys have to bail because they were coming at 2 to go right there.
That's right. That kind of forced their hand to either pit under the stage brake and go to the very back, or stay out and on old tires and hope to be able to maintain their track position.
And that's what we saw in that last graphic. They had to stay out. 17 did come in that first group and was able to have the fresh tires, and I think eventually that's why he gets the gain through the start of stage 3. So there was a couple of those restarts, but this is the final one. 17 in control of the race.
Yeah, heavy braking zone, downhill, chaos almost every restart. You see the 16 just rub the 17's right rear, Travis. He just barely gets him. Just kind of nudges him a little bit in the back, maybe gets him in the right rear quarter panel. Chris has the brakes locked up like you see. I think the 16's trying not to wreck him, and that's why he gets a little sideways there coming off. But it actually allows Chris to be in a pretty good spot here. He's got good momentum in the middle there. He's not really worried about, the 77 on the outside of him. So it's going to be the 16 and 17 racing into turn 2.
And we see this all the time at Watkins Glen. It's going to be a drag race now down to turn 2. And we talked about several times, you can't beat side by side through the S's. The 17 tucks in behind him and sets up for another race. But now the 16's in control of the race. I think a lot of people thought right here, SVG is going to go win the race.
Travis, here's where the important path happens to get to the checkered flag. And you can see here, there's about a car and a half, 2-car length gap between the 16 and 17. SVG probably can just run his normal line through there and not worry about, he's one of the best breakers in the world, Chris getting to his back bumper, especially on old tires. But what happens is SVG hits the wall on the right side of the car, and it completely screws up the middle part of his inner loop.
Yeah, this angle doesn't show it great. We'll get to Chris's onboard in a minute, but he hits that wall and is sideways through here, and this is where Chris gets to pounce. Yeah. And I think there was just a little bit there too where, we talk about, well, he couldn't get there. The 17 car is probably not the guy that's going to run you over anyways, and I think, SVG's used to people who drive him a little different than Chris, so he overdid it.
Yeah, I think racing on Saturday every single week, he sees the end of these races where he's won a lot of road racing on Saturday, but he's getting beat up doing it, and he knows you have to muscle people around. And Chris wasn't going to be able to get to him probably, and if he did get to him, Chris isn't one of those drivers that's going to completely rough him over. He's going to try to look for an opportunity to pass him as clean as possible.
So here's another couple exciting moments right here, probably because his tires were so heated up and used up after getting loose to the bus stop. He's trying to get back there to have an opportunity through 10, super sideways, trying to have another chance at it down in 11. I mean, he is just wrecking and barely hanging on to it. I know right here, the group of us back here, we're hoping they're going to compete for the win. We thought it was going to be one of those situations like the Roval a couple years ago with Jimmy Johnson and Martin Truex, just completely taking each other out.
I watched this replay and think, my goodness, that's why SVG is so good. The car control he had just in that little short straightaway, his car is facing every direction, but the direction it's supposed to be going straight, and he keeps it under control.
So Buescher gets the win. We know that. Let's jump back on his in-car coming into this zone, because this is where we're going to see SVG hit the wall and how it really screws up his bus stop.
Yeah, under braking here, he just gets too far to the right. He carries in a little too much speed, rubs the wall right there, and just that little contact. Everything has to be set up perfect for the timing to get through the bus stop, and it throws it off right from the very beginning. You see him get way up the racetrack here as it goes on. The line here is to stay tucked left like Chris is. You can see he's quite a bit further left through this section of the bus stop than SVG is. SVG is out of control.
Yeah, as you're talking about the lines, I just want to highlight, so here's the second set of curbs, and out here is the carousel entry curbs. The normal line is exactly what Chris Buescher's doing. You want to kind of straighten this area up and enter the carousel reasonably straight, not taking a hard right back. SVG, now he's so far wide, he has to take this super aggressive angle to get between these curbs, and he's out wide, cutting back through. This allows Chris Buescher just to pounce all over him.
Yeah, SVG's checking up his car to get back online, and he's out of control here. You can see his wheels moving to the left. He is loose. Chris isn't really trying to run in the back of him that much. He's just trying to go underneath him. He's trying to cross him over. And SVG, like we talked about earlier when we first watched this, Travis, SVG might not be trying to pinch him off. He's just out of control, and he's going wherever his car will take him, trying to carry as much speed to keep at least Chris next to him. He thinks if I can at least keep him next to him off the carousel, I might have a shot to win this race. I can't let him get ahead of me. So SVG's car control, it's phenomenal, and you see it right here as well.
We want to break down a little bit more of a data approach on that bus stop and what SVG did different going into there besides just hitting the wall.
There's quite a few things interesting on here, and it's a lot of data. I think if someone just looked at this like, oh no, what are we looking at? But we can zero in on a couple things to explain it. And one thing that's super interesting here, this is the second to last lap and the last lap, SVG laid on top of each other. And what you notice through it is right in here, the blue line is the last lap, the orange line is the second to last lap. He drives in deeper, has to use more brake on the last lap, and he continues to use brake throughout the bus stop to get his car under control. That's not the way to go fast. You want to get off the brake pedal, let your car roll. There were a lot of things going on there that the data shows the bus stop was an out-of-control moment for the 16.
Absolutely, and you talked about that. So just a little bit more for anybody who's not looked at SMT. At the top here, we have a speed trace and then an RPM trace, what gear they're in, throttle, brake, steering, and then delta time. We get all this data live. It's super useful for us as crew chiefs to analyze what's happening for our car, for our driver, what to come up with for changes. But you're talking about how out of control it was. Right here's the steering trace. Again, you mentioned orange was a lap before, well in control of the race, doesn't blow the corner. Blue, this moment right here, the orange line is still turning left. The blue line goes way back down. Down is to the right. He has this huge correction up through here, and that's what we're seeing over here on the other side. This is where we see him go shooting off line over here. And this also shows the path of the cars through the corners. And we see a really good angle of that right here. Like you mentioned, Chris Buescher's on the right line right here, and SVG's wide. And you see the lap before the orange line, he was on the line.
Yeah, SVG's the ghost car here on the lap before, and then this is real time with the last lap. It's a car width and a quarter wider through that area, and you see him getting on the brake a little later. You know, he's on the brake in this area right in here just to get his car under control so he can stay on the racetrack and not go through the grass, and that allows the 17 to close right to his back bumper.
Well, this was some really awesome data to break down how Chris Buescher played spoiler, won the race. Right here in the bus stop, we saw some of the changes that we talked about at Watkins Glen in last week's episode and how that affected the race. We're going to break down the rest of that next.
The NASCAR playoffs head to Bristol, baby, with 4 drivers on the outside looking in. 8-time Bristol winner Kyle Busch joins the gang to get you ready for the first elimination race of the year. It's NASCAR Inside the Playoffs on True TV and Max.
We just talked about how Chris avoided a lap 1 incident and how he won the race in the bus stop. Let's look at what happened to the 12 car on that lap 1 incident in the bus stop and how that really affected his day.
The steering shaft is broken off of everything. I have nothing. They have to tow me back. I can't even. The steering wheel is free.
I'm talking to race control now. We're gonna make a determination, all right?
Tow back.
Series wants you out. Brad wants you out.
So we just heard a lot about what Ryan Blaney's perspective was on it, but you know, he's on the tow truck. He can't go back under his own power. That's what we're going to dig into right now.
NASCAR put in new rules a few years back about damaged vehicle policy and things like that. And Ryan thought, I didn't make much contact here. And you can see him, he's even locking the brakes up, telling the tow truck driver, I need to go to my pit stall. But that's not what the rule is, Travis.
Yeah, so let's break down that exact rule because this is very important. The way we understand it kind of in layman's terms is if you get flat tires out there, they'll push you back, they'll tow you back so you can change a tire. But if you're in an incident and you cannot get back under your own power, you're out of the race. That's what you talked about just a second ago. The owners didn't want to have to bring extra stuff. We didn't want cars out there riding around 50 laps down, potentially bringing out another caution. And this is the rule right here.
Yeah, I'm usually not very good with the rule book, Travis. I've been known to look at that differently than others, but 8.8.9C says, and I think the important thing here is this right here. It's a lot of words that basically says it was never intended to tow a damaged vehicle on DVP back to pit road. And a damaged vehicle is something that is a little vague, but in the industry we understand that is a car that slows or is slightly damaged from an accident. You get on the DVP clock, if you still get to continue, you're on it, you have to get those repairs done in a certain time. But if you're on the DVP and it takes a tow truck to get you back to the garage or pit road, you're done. And that's why they were telling Ryan Blaney to get out of the vehicle. Your day is done. He didn't want to get out of the vehicle. He was trying to do everything he could to try to salvage at least some points at Watkins Glen.
Yeah, you know, the stress of the playoffs and everything probably leads to that, right? Don't just take me back, we'll fix it, right? And in his steering issue, it probably felt a bit like a mechanical problem. And another part of the rule book, do not quote me on the sections that you just labeled off because I can't do that. But a mechanical issue you can have. You can go behind the wall. You can fix it. The key difference is he was involved in that crash. No matter what the issue is after the crash, if you were made contact, deemed to be part of the wreck, that's when the whole situation where you can't get back into the race comes in.
Yeah, and you don't get off of the DVP clock until you go out on the racetrack and make minimum speed.
Yep, towed back out of the race. Unfortunate day for them. More carnage for more playoff guys and just other situations. 6 cars right here. William Byron behind them. This is going to get pretty exciting again in the S's.
Exactly. They are almost 3 wide again. And this is a much larger crash here with William Byron. Joey Logano and Brad Keselowski going through there, 2, almost 3 wide right there. And Joey is actually kind of in some of the marbles there. And he talked about that later, how he couldn't steer his car to go straight. And that gets William Byron in a bad position. And when William gets in it, it takes him and Brad into the wall.
What a crazy wreck. And look at right here. His wheel is just about in the window. Great job on the window nets. They've always done their job pretty well. To not let that tire get in there. This has shades of F1 with the halo bar and Max Verstappen coming in on top of Lewis Hamilton's head. This would be very, very similar. That right front fender could have taken out Brad's head if that window net didn't do its job.
As you know, Travis, that headrest on the left-hand side, it's only a couple inches from the window net. And that window net is probably doing its job, but giving into that headrest. That right front tire is probably on Brad's headrest, which means it's 5 or 6 inches away from his helmet. So that was definitely a wild ride. And the window net's doing the same job on the 24. It's rubbing against the barrier on the left-hand side of his car. So these cars are very safe, thankfully, and they did their job right there. And this violent crash at the top of the S's.
So several instances, lots of camera angles. We're going to jump to another camera that did its job very well all race right up until this moment. We're going to see here, kind of at the back of this clip, I'll just slowly play it forward here because you're going to see what happens. All right, now we can see the 6 and the 24 coming into frame. This shows, well, let's stop it before we even get to that. Look at the marbles. This is what you just brought up. Look at everything all over the track offline in this area. There is the remnants of the tire. There's people's duct tape. There is just everything up here that started this race.
And like you said, they're 2 wide right here, and your outside tire is right at the edge of those marbles. So 3 is not going to work. They're going to be in the marbles, and even the guy on the outside is risking getting into them a little bit.
Yeah, so crazy impact right there. 24 way up in the air, catches the wall, slides into him, but it just shows that offline and 3 wide, it never worked through the S's this weekend.
At the end of the race, nobody is letting anybody go. They're going through their 2 wide, so give yourself the best opportunity to be online so you have the best racetrack to race on.
Nobody giving an inch, out in the marbles, 3 wide, causing a bunch of these incidents that we just broke down. It's all because of the playoffs. Final race of round of 16 coming up next week. We're going to break that down next.
Hey race fans, Corey LaJoy here. Join Ryan Flores and myself for Stacking Pennies each week. I'll break down my race and explain what happened right out of my windshield.
Plus, we award the Dogs of the Week for the best pit crews and go in-depth on all the money stops, pit road mistakes, and penalties.
And we've got a ton of guests. We have SVG stopping by. We had Ricky Stenhouse after he punched Kyle Busch in the face. We've had Bubba. We've had all sorts of guys in here in the Nonsense Garage, so you do not want to miss it. Check us out on Sirius XM Channel 90, YouTube, or wherever you find your podcast. Each and every week, Stacking Pennies is what's up.
I'm Ryan Flores. Join Kim Kuhn and myself each and every week right here at Around the Track. Whether you are going to the racetrack or watching from home, we get you ready for all things national and regional level.
And we'll tell you who and what to watch for each week. Plus, we get you ready for the weekend at the racetrack, and Erica will help you place your bets to win some easy money.
Be sure to check out Around the Track every Wednesday on NASCAR's YouTube channel.
Watkins Glen's in the books. Bunch more movement in the playoffs around the cutoff line. A championship favorite and some guys who run great at Bristol right on the bubble.
Yeah, we knew this round was going to have the opportunity to shake things up. And every week as we go through it, we see this complete movement throughout the playoffs. There's some guys towards the front we probably didn't expect, and there's some guys in the back that we didn't expect. And you just saw the movement right there. I think going into this, Travis, if you would have told me Austin Cindric, Alex Bowman, and Daniel Suarez would all be in the top 5 going into the final round of this section of playoff races, we would have said, oh, you're crazy. But the races played out well for them. They did their job, and they've got themselves a nice little buffer going into Bristol.
I was going to say, with almost a race buffer in points is what's impressive. You can score 60 winning and every stage, but 40 is what you get for the win. So some of these guys just about can fall out of the race and still have an okay day. And then you look down to the other side of it. Yeah. You got Denny Hamlin, who we all thought was going to be a championship favorite. I mean, almost every year, he's on the outside looking in. Martin Truex, Brad Keselowski, Ty Gibbs right there on the cutoff line. It's everybody's game. The chaos round has really shook this up like we've talked about.
As surprising as this left side of the board was for me when looking at it after the race, almost as surprising as seeing Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex over here on the right, and 2 of them below the cut line already going into Bristol. So they've got some work to do this Saturday night.
You know, we've talked a lot as we led into the playoffs about, kind of where the stress level starts. I think it's right here. 25, 26 points for guys that run decent at Bristol. They're probably going to be okay. Obviously, they're not free and clear, and they've lost a lot, like you talked about. So let's look at how all these guys fared. We're going to circle right here, right where I started that line, just below it. Ty Gibbs, Denny Hamlin, Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr. This is pretty much our fight for the bubble, but let's look at how they ran at Bristol last time.
It's pretty amazing. Those guys are right in there. Martin Truex, always good at Bristol. Ty Gibbs ran well. Brad Keselowski, Denny Hamlin won the race. So these guys have a little more confidence sitting here today than they maybe would have if we were going to a different racetrack. They all took the tire fiasco we had in the spring and made it good for them and scored a ton of points.
So the question is, are they going to hope for another tire fiasco, or are they all just going to want to run good straight up?
Well, they're pretty confident. They handled it better than everybody else. Their tires went faster for longer than everybody else. So I think they're probably feeling pretty good going into Bristol, even though they're below or right at the cut line.
So I think this is a little bit unprecedented. You have 5 of the strongest cars pretty much on the outside looking in going into it. Let's just look at what would happen if they all ran like they did in the spring race and how the points would shake out after the race.
So right here, Travis, what we have is if they ran exactly the way they did in the spring race, everybody throughout the field, and you put those points into it, who's going on to the round of 12? And what you see is Denny Hamlin needs that win. He's going to automatically advance. And it moves around a little bit. Chase Briscoe, who had a great week last week at Watkins Glen and got himself above, needs to score more than 24 points. But Martin Truex, even with a good run and Denny winning the race, Martin Truex still would be on the outside looking in. So he needs to either win or score a ton of stage points and finish in the top 3 or 4.
Yeah, you mentioned it. 44 points. That's a fantastic day. Every day at the racetrack. That's stage points and a great finish. And it's not going to be enough for him. So Truex has got a lot to do because there's so much strength around the cut line. And unfortunately, like you just said, Chase Briscoe, William Byron, these guys, they've done a decent job to be in a good spot. I think Byron had one of those tire issues in that race, and that's why he only scored 2. But if he has a day like that, he's going to be on the outside looking in. It's going to be a lot to look forward to.
We broke down Watkins Glen and saw people, and Chris Buescher missed a big wreck at the beginning, yet Brian Blaney and others got into it in the playoffs. Bristol's another place. If you get a spin on the backstretch and you're running 4 or 5 cars behind it, you can't get slowed down, your day ends, and you could be at the bottom of this page looking out.
I don't know what we're going to call the rest of the rounds, but the end of the chaos round is at Bristol. The night race at Bristol is one of the most iconic races in all of NASCAR. It's going to be on Saturday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on USA. Tune in.